Good afternoon, my friends. It's Simon Lown here from 2A Digital, and today I'm going to be talking with you about a content audit. So, what that involves, and to start to get you to think about what kinds of things you should be encompassing when you're building out a content creation list, which is going to be part of your content audit. So, as ever, if you've got any questions at the end, please do feel free to ask. And if you want to join us, I'll put a link in the post, which will be below this video, to our Facebook group, and you're more than welcome to join us in there and ask any questions. So, when you're performing a content on your website, it will include reviewing your existing content, which we covered in the previous video. But it takes it a few steps further. So, to review your existing content, go and check that post out, and then when you've done that, what you'll actually do is move on to a full content audit. Now, this will obviously involve you or somebody else, on your behalf, actually reading your existing content and determining, making a judgment call as to whether it's still current, relevant, factual, etc. So, all of those things obviously need to be true. But then you move on to your content. So what actually is a content audit? So a content audit is a system to find out if your content marketing is essentially on track and your posts are performing as you expect them to. So there's an element of measuring the performance and progress of your content delivery. By performing a content audit, you're essentially stating your intention to dominate your local market, because really what you're wanting to be doing with your content is really covering all the hot topics, the problems, the questions that people have, and really delivering value to them. So really what you need to have is your content having a purpose, and by delivering useful, valuable, helpful content to your local audience, you're essentially positioning yourself as a trusted local expert. With your content audit, what you're actually going to do is you're going to outline your goals. What do you want your content to achieve? You'll be doing an inventory of your content and your keyword that's existing and what you plan to create in the future. You'll be analysing your website data and actually creating a plan, like I say, for everything, so that what you've already got and what's coming in the future. And you'll essentially be adjusting your content marketing based on your analysis. So as you go forward, you'll start to see what works, what doesn't work. And then you can plan to scale up your content marketing in other ways, and you can do that with retargeting, paid ads, other kinds of outreach. So let's start with the first step. So this is essentially outlining the content audit goals, and actually goals for your content as well. So if your content has no specific purpose when you create it, if you're just sitting down at your keyboard one day and saying, oh, I need to create some content, and you just type some stuff out and post it, why are you really creating it? If your intention is just to sort of show up or remind people that you exist, then you're probably struggling to make any impact with your content, and it's unlikely to be moving the bottom line of your business, and that is to say profits, because without planning out what it is you want your content to achieve, how are you going to measure whether or not that is actually performing? It's going to be really difficult. And if you're not building into your content plan some way of measuring, so having lead magnets, or you're setting calls, or if you're building a community, you get a group, whatever it might be, if you've got no measurement, how do you know if it's working? I mean, obviously you can use Google Analytics to see if people are coming to your page and actually reading it, but beyond that, did it help them? Were they happy with it? Do they want more? You don't know. So you've really got to think about what is the purpose of your content and how are you going to measure that going forward. So when you're creating some goals for your content, you can break it out into categories, and there are a number of things that you should potentially consider. So you could start by obviously increasing brand awareness. So that's going to be your personal branding. It could be your origin story, why you're the best at your service, showing up, showing your passion for helping people in your industry. what you stand for, what you stand against. All of these things, are things that people are genuinely interested about. Then you could obviously put out information about your services. I'm sure you've done that already. But then there's also things like cultural branding and geographical branding, success stories and testimonials. So these are things that people often miss as a marketing tool, but it also can be brought into your content and be a part of your storytelling. Then you could potentially look at content that increases your brand loyalty. So this is where you're building trust. So is it through better customer services, building a community, Facebook groups, Twitter followings, getting more connections on LinkedIn? Are you being interactive on social media? Do you have brand consistency? And do you have any kind of loyalty programs or offers that you might be putting out there? So all of those, again, can be woven into your content and can be used as a way of measuring how successful that content is. Then you've got other content which is going to educate potential prospects, and so it could be general education, but it could also be entertainment combined with education. It could be breaking common misconceptions, overcoming specific problems, guidance with clear steps, pitfalls and the unexpected. All of these things can be really helpful to people when they're getting into something that they've never done before. Then you've got, looking at things like your prospects and customers and actually engaging with them. So you could be putting out, little quizzes or polls, trying to get general feedback, asking questions, or even getting them to self-qualify. All of these things are easy possible with technology today. Then there's obviously lead generation. So if your content is specifically to generate leads, via education, solving problems guides, checklist walkthroughs, and they have lead magnets, these are really great ways that you can attract people, but it's also very easy to measure the results. So once you start getting clear on exactly what the purpose of your content is, then you can start getting some ideas of how to measure it, because not all content is created equal. Some content you will just put out there just because it helps somebody, and it may be that some pieces of content don't actually go to a lead magnet or lead to a call. It might lead to another set of content that helps them further. And so all of these things need to be figured out in advance of you creating it, and that's ultimately going to increase the effectiveness and overall results of your content plan. Now, the content inventory. So that's the next step of doing an audit. And if you've got more than a few pieces of content, what you're going to want to do is create a list of all of the existing content that you've already got. This will highlight whether or not you've got any overlapping subjects, and it will be useful when making your content plan later on in this process. Analyze your data. So if you've got data already, if you're using Google Analytics, or if you've got some form of analytics on the back end of your website, have a look at it. Have a look at which pieces of content are actually doing well. What pieces of content have been visited the most? Do you have information about how long people spend on a page, or if you've got page depth to see how many pieces of content people will look at in a session? This is all really valuable stuff. So if you've only recently installed Google Analytics, you're not going to have much data to work with, so you'll have to give it a little bit of time. But if you have got Analytics installed for a while and you've just never looked at it, go and take a look now and see what it tells you, because you might be surprised at some of the results. Now, once you have the website data, anything with no or very low engagement should probably be, well, either removed, possibly rewritten. I mean, if you wrote it for a purpose initially, then it may just be that you didn't do a good enough job. Maybe it's not laid out well enough. We will be covering that in other posts. I won't go into the anatomy of the perfect post right here, but there could be a number of reasons why it's not performing. If it's a bit of a judgment call as to whether the content is not high enough value, or it's unable to keep your visitors on site, depending on why people aren't looking at it. If you're getting lots of visitors to a piece of content but they're just bouncing off and going somewhere else, it may be that it's not very appealing to look at, and that can be fixed. If they're spending a bit of time on the page and they're not finishing reading through the content, it may just be that it's not really being helpful enough. Maybe it's not easy enough to understand. Maybe there are some things that you could do to change that. But if you're only just starting with analytics and you've only recently installed it, you have to give it some time. It's not something that you can just install it 1 week and the next get an answer to your results. You've really got to give it time to build up, and depending on how many visitors you get, of course. I mean, if you're getting hundreds of visitors a day, you could build up data quite quickly. For most websites, that's not the case, and so it may take weeks or even months to build up enough data to actually become valuable enough to really start to tell you which content is performing. Now, one thing that I will mention, and so I'm not going to go into deep on the anatomy of the perfect post, but ultimately user experience is key. I mean, it really does matter how people view your content within the first few seconds overall, and then how valuable they provide it when they're working through it. So it is really something you need to be spending quite a lot of time on. It does actually mean that only the best, most valuable, useful content that you can provide is the only content that you want on your website. Anything else really doesn't have a place. If it's a half-hearted effort, or if it only does part of a job, or if it's not really solving the whole problem and you're still left with questions at the end of it, you really need to rewrite it at the very least, or unpublish it until you get time to do so, because ultimately it's only going to be hurting you in the long run. If people aren't getting value out of your content and they're not sticking around to read it, and maybe even leaving the odd negative comment about it, then that is really not good at all, and so you need to fix that. Now, actually creating a content plan itself, now we will cover this in more detail in a later post, so I'll just cover the outline here, but we will be going into depth later on with another post, so it'll be specifically about creating content plans. But to create a content plan, you've got to define your goals. You're going to research your audience needs. You're going to analyze your competitors. You will obviously review your existing content, brainstorm your new content requirements, and create a timeline, because this is also important. Creating a timeline, creating some consistency about when you put out your posts is really going to help you get a bit more engagement. Creating and posting your content to that schedule, how you do that, if you want to use schedulers, especially if you start getting into social media, what type of tools are there available, we'll cover some of that. And then amplifying your message, actually using social and even retargeting. And as we said, once you've measured and analyzed your content's effectiveness, you can then look at scaling a bit with some paid ads to cold traffic. So that's essentially the outline of creating a content plan. And once you've got that and you start working through it, then it's a case of reviewing the data and looking at your content's performance. And then if you need to, you want to adjust and pivot based on what the results are. So it could be by testing different styles and formats and types of posts. Will give you a broad range of data so that you can determine exactly what your audience is looking for. But then once you know what your audience wants, by testing the different types of posts, whether they like the short post, the longer post, the in-depth post, posts with lead magnets, or that only they give you problem to a single solution, but then give you related content, and you can see if people take in other content as well. But once you know what they want, give them more. Do more of that and see if they still soak it up. Templating your best performing content and replicating it with new post content is going to be one of the quickest ways to really grow the engagement of your content and improving your content strategy. Then once you've got some ideas of what works really well, you can then test rewriting older content and see if that improves the outcome of the older content as well. So as we said, scaling your content using content marketing strategies is something that ultimately, once you've got some results from your analytics, is something that you're going to look at doing. So all of your best performing content is going to be what you're going to use to scale But first, you make sure you've got to have automation in place of some sort. So you've got to be able to collect people's email addresses or a phone number, or funnel them into a messenger bot, something in that order. Because if you're not doing that, then really, why are you doing all this? I mean, ultimately, the goal of a content audit and having a content strategy for what you're putting out there is essentially to increase your bottom line. And there's really no other reason for doing it. If you've already got a big enough bottom line and it's just a case of brand awareness, then obviously you can adjust your strategy accordingly. But for most people, if they're putting time and effort into creating strategy, it's really something they want to pay off in the long run. Be that with rankings on the search engines, getting people to download stuff so they get an email address and they can follow up, get phone numbers, etc. But ultimately, you want people to become customers. You're putting the content out there to attract leads, to turn them into prospects. And once they're a prospect, you really want to be talking to them and looking to convert them into a customer at the earliest opportunity. Why else would you be doing it? So to actually scale that, once you've got some of the organic stuff sorted out with getting some rankings on the search engines, you will be using retargeting ads, and you can use the Facebook ads to do that. Really powerful system to use for retargeting. You'll be using content pre-launches on social, so you'll be building up some anticipation to content that you're releasing so that people know that it's coming and can subscribe to getting notifications when things are released. You'll be omnipresent across all social platforms. You'll be using a single piece of content and repurposing it across multiple platforms. You could even do localized cold traffic campaigns, as we already said, and then distributed paid ads testing with various channels. So there's loads of advertising channels out there, and you can test all of them. So that's really it for a content audit, and working towards building a content plan. And so in conclusion, sort of rounding this up, your content creation, if it's up to this point being a random series of ideas in your head that you create in your spare time, this content audit outline will help you fix that and start creating content with a real purpose. Content marketing is not something that you can really dabble with. It's a bit like SEO. It's a bit like paid ads as well, actually. If you want to create effective funnels, if you want effective ads, if you want to rank on the search engines, all of these strategies require you to learn the basics, the fundamentals, to get that right. And then once you've applied that strategy to your content, you then need to be consistent with it and put in the time and effort for it to deliver the results that you want over time. Once you have a solid sort of content creation plan and you apply a good SEO strategy to it, then amplify it with social media and paid traffic, you essentially come up with a competition-crushing, evergreen lead-generating machine that will catapult your business far beyond your wildest dreams. Honestly, that is no word of a lie. That is what can happen for you if you're really serious about using content to its full effect and its full advantage. Not only are you helping all of your visitors, potential customers, prospects, with really high value content, it will help you convert much more of them into paying customers over time. And the longer that you do it for, the more powerful a content generating, lead generating machine you'll be building, and that will essentially sustain your business through good times and bad. So that's it for this particular video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have any questions, please, as I say, do feel free to ask. Check out our other videos on YouTube, come onto our website, check out our other blog posts, or join us in the Facebook group. More than happy to have a chat with you. And so until next time, enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye for now.